April manufacturing production and sales increased 7% year on year. We need some cheerful numbers like that. Are they true? The numbers showed strong contributions made from automotive, iron, steel, metal components, petroleum, chemical products, rubber and plastics. So looking at the latest in the manufacturing area, we're looking at talking about unpacking that detail with Conrad Besaidenout, who's the Manufacturing Circle Executive Director. Conrad, you've got what you wished for. You've been talking for a long time that the rand is not at the right level. We need a weaker rand. And I think your supporters, some of them certainly have said the government should intervene. Well, the government hasn't intervened in the way that it might have. The rand has been weak and it looks like staying weak, so you're pleased about that?
Yeah, well, unfortunately the rand is weak despite policy, not because of it. But I think it's important to understand what the weak rand or the more competitive rand, well, it's the competitiveness that we wished for was 9 to 9.50 to the dollar. It's now gone beyond that. But what it does in low demand environments, high cost environments, is that it ameliorates the margin squeeze that manufacturers are experiencing because of high administered prices, like I said, low demand, and then you've also got productivity that has not kept a pace of the price of industrial peace. And that is a very heady cocktail for which the weaker rand provides some relief.
So do you think it's gone too far? Would you prefer it not to become as weak, or are you happy the weaker it goes?
Well, we'll have to monitor the situation. I mean, if it only stays here for a little while and it goes back up, then of course, you know, the impact might be very little. If it goes weaker, it might get worse. If it stays there for a long while, there may be some adjustment that will have to be undergone. But we meet again on the 20th of June. We'll assess the situation today. While I spoke to some of them on the phone, the situation, the mood was still very much upbeat.
Wayne?
Yeah, Kunrad, when you know, obviously a weaker rand helps manufacturing. Whether you're an exporter or not, the cost of imports just go up and it gives you breathing space. But by and large, it's temporary breathing space, because eventually higher inflation that will eventually erode your margins again, high inflation because of the weaker rand. The real question is, what does South Africa have to do from a manufacturing viewpoint to actually be competitive, where it doesn't have to rely on a weaker rand to give some assistance? Is there anything that can be done? Is it just government policy? Is it scale benefits? Is it unproductivity? Is it laws? What is, I mean, manufacturing 30 years ago was 4 times bigger than what it is now. And manufacturing is only one of the only areas that can truly generate jobs. We need it.
Look, of course, we always get nailed on our position on the rand, because it's a very ideological thing. It's a thing that people get quite passionate about, and you know, perhaps in certain respects one wouldn't want to have it any other way. But I think if there's one key thing that we really need to address, it's the domestic costs, and that is also what renders us much more vulnerable for the negative impacts of a weaker rand than it otherwise would have been. At the moment, inflation is still very much driven by it. And so if we can address administered costs, if we can benchmark how we finance and fund the rollout and maintenance of infrastructure in this country against our most competitive competitors globally, that would put us in a great situation, and it's not being done.
So is it Eskom, municipal rates and taxes?
Well, it's all of it. The municipalities are struggling at the moment. There is unhappiness about e-tolls. There's unhappiness about water prices, about all sorts of stealth taxes. Clearly, there's some answers that needs to be gotten from the fiscal system that it's not providing at the moment. And the reviews, in order to determine how we need to change the system, how we need to tweak it, is not being done at the moment. There are macro reviews that are being done to determine whether we need to spend more on the productive side. Of course we need to. We know the answer to that. But how we tweak the system in terms of you know, bringing the costs down is a very different, a more difficult thing to do, and we need to start doing that.
Zela?
Well, I think the question that possibly, Wayne, if I could steal your words, is how do you increase the value of our exports, of what we manufacture? What has happened to the diversity of what we export from 1960 to today? What has happened to the sophistication of what we export, what we manufacture and export? What has happened to the income content of what we export? Because we do know that the import content of it has risen. What has happened to the skills capability of what we export? You know, what you produce and export determines who you are in the world. And manufacturing is front and center of that in terms of how it it has core skills that are dense and can spread out into the economy. What has happened to that?
Well, it's deteriorated, I think, along with manufacturing, which is relative to other sectors, and there are both positive and negative reasons for it. Relative to other sectors, manufacturing, in all fairness, have declined somewhat over the last 30 years. And so many of those things like education and so on are very difficult to solve. But there are things that we can do that will yield better results in the short term, such as securing market access, which is a huge problem when it comes to Asia, when it comes to South America, and when it comes to Africa because of logistical and red tape reasons.
Quick final point, Kunrad. You talk about improving industrial policy support from the DTI.
Yes,
Nice to the government.
It has certainly improved, and I think the strong showing of the automotive sector is certainly one of the signals that tells us that story.
Very protected sector too.
It is a very protective sector, but if it didn't have the protection that it currently has, our current account deficit would have been much higher, meaning that we would have had a much weaker rand today.